What if I told you that the one thing holding you back from accomplishing your impossible goals in your life, in your business, in your career was just the size of your thinking? Many years ago, there was a young sculptor who stood before a massive block of marble. And this marble had sat in this town for decades. It was ugly, it was cracked, it was abandoned, it was weathered down. Many artists had actually tried to come before and do something with this marble and create art out of it, and to no success did so. But this young sculptor ran his hands over the cold, rough surface, imagining what it could be. He imagined the possibilities he could create from it. He thought, maybe I could be the one that creates something impossible. And in that moment of reflection, imagining what it could be, immediately his inner voice of doubt came in and started telling him why he is not good enough to do so. Sound familiar? Anytime you want to go for impossible or large goals in your life, anytime you want to do something extraordinary, that voice of doubt kicks in. For him, it said, it's too damaged. Why even waste your time? Many have already tried and failed. What makes you any different? And for a moment, he almost listened. He almost said, maybe they're right. But after thinking, he refused to accept that. He was determined to create something extraordinary. And so for 3 years he worked. Imagine 3 years, day after day, chipping away, and everybody is telling you that what you're doing is not possible. Chisel in hand, he carved not only marble, but belief, vision, possibility. Chip by chip, stroke by stroke, creating a masterpiece. When everybody saw marble, he saw possibility. 3 years later, he took a step back, and the entire world was shocked. What used to be this ugly, beaten down, cracked, abandoned, weathered down marble had turned into 17 feet high, approximately 12,500 pounds, one of the most beautiful and greatest sculptures in art history, what we know today as the David. Who was the sculptor? His name was Michelangelo. When all the doubters and all the non-believers saw what had been created, this beautiful, amazing masterpiece, they went to Michelangelo and they said, how did you create what no one ever before could? His response was simple. Paraphrasing, he said, the problem was never the marble. The problem was that others thought too small. Let me say that one more time. The problem was that others thought too small. His actual words were, the greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. In other words, thinking too small. What is going to be your masterpiece? What is your David? What is your impossible goal? Best-selling author Adam Grant once said, I found new evidence that those that dream bigger go on to achieve greater things. I call this the law of big thinking. So why do we think small? What keeps us from going for impossible goals? What keeps us from thinking so much bigger? I found that it's 4 core things. Number 1, it's lack of self-belief. Oftentimes we believe that we're inadequate. We're not good enough. Number 2, fear. Fear of failure, fear of what others might think, fear of the criticism of what others will say. Number 3, rejection. And number 4, discomfort. We do not like to leave our comfort zone. But anytime you go for impossible goals, anytime you think bigger, it requires you to get uncomfortable. And so, how do we go for impossible goals? How do we think bigger? There's 3 ways to do so. Number 1, you simply take your goal and you make it a whole lot bigger. Let's say you have a business that did $1 million in revenue last year, and Typical growth is 15, 20%. And so you set the goal to go do $1.2 million this next year. If you want to apply the law of big thinking, you're going to take that goal and you're going to make it 8 million, 10 million, 12 million. And what that's going to do, it's going to force you to find better pathways, better people to growing your business to accomplish your impossible goal. Number 2, you take your deadline and you make it a whole lot sooner. Elon Musk once said, if a deadline is long, it's wrong. And so time can actually be used as a tool. Let's say you're 25 years old and you want to be a millionaire by the time you're 50. If you want to use time as a tool, if you want to bring your deadline in and make it sooner, bring it in and say, by the age of 30, you're going to be a millionaire. Set that new impossible goal. What that will then do is it'll help you understand and realize that a lot of the things you're currently doing will not serve you or get you to where you're wanting to go. Third and final, challenge yourself to see things that others cannot see. When everybody saw ugly, cracked marble, Michelangelo saw the David, a masterpiece. He saw what others could not. There's a beautiful example. It's an old example, yet powerful today. I want you to look at this visual and I want you to count how many F's are in this sentence. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to do so. Ready? Go. Awesome. How many of you got all 4? Did anybody get 5? How about 6? Okay, there are 7 F's in this sentence. The F's that are the most common to see are the F's at the beginning of the word, such as finished or files. The ones that are a little harder, but still common to find, are the F's in the middle of the sentence. The ones that are almost always missed or not seen or not heard are the F's and the ofs. The reason is the F in the of makes a V sound rather than an F sound. In this example, F's represent opportunities. Oftentimes missed, not heard, or not seen, even though they're right in front of you. Small thinking always equals missed opportunities. Helen Keller once said, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. So in my life, I ask myself, where do I have sight but no vision? Where can I dream bigger? Where can I think bigger? Where can I go for impossible goals? Am I practicing what I'm preaching? Am I dreaming big? And a year ago, I wasn't. I woke up and I realized I was just coasting on cruise control. You know that feeling where you're just very comfortable and everything's just going as planned, nothing crazy, nothing new. That was the phase of life I was in. And I realized that I needed to start going for bigger goals. I needed to start thinking bigger. I needed to set an impossible goal. And so I decided, I said, I am going to be a best-selling author. And that goal scared me. It made me very uncomfortable. I remember telling my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to be a best-selling author. And although very supportive, he said, Blake, how are you going to be a best-selling author when you can barely even compose an email? I laughed it off, still very determined, and I began researching how to become a best-selling author. I explored all the traditional paths of publishing, self-publishing, hybrid publishing, traditional publishing. I researched how to create engaging content that sells, that impacts the reader. And as I went through this whole process, I realized one thing. If I'm playing the same game everybody else is playing, if I'm thinking the same way everybody else is thinking, how am I going to get a different result? If I'm going for the impossible, I can't play the same game everybody else is playing. I can't think the same way everybody else is thinking. Those pathways will not get me to an extraordinary result. And so I began to realize I have to think about this differently. I have to think bigger. I have to think more creative to go and accomplish this. And one day I sat there contemplating, reverse engineering how I was going to be a best-selling author, and a flash of inspiration came to me. And this inspiration said, Blake, partner with someone that's already done what you want to do. Fortunately, at this time, I had been in discussions with Dr. Benjamin Hardy on creating a business and a training program that helps serve entrepreneurs to the highest level, helping them scale their business and taking his curriculum and applying it in their business. And so my new impossible goal became co-author a book with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dr. Benjamin Hardy was a best-selling author. His books have sold over 1 million copies, very well known in the business world and in the self-development world. And so I decided, although very nervous, I worked up the courage and the confidence. I decided I was going to ask Dr. Benjamin Hardy to co-author his next book with him. And I remember flying out to meet him. We sat down, I'm almost shaking. Have you ever had one of those conversations where you know if this goes well, it could alter the course of your life and your entire future? This is how I felt about this situation. And so I laid out my ideas. I began to present to him why I felt co-authoring his next book would benefit him, benefit the business, and ultimately help us reach our goals more effectively. And then I went silent. And for what seemed like an eternity, but truly was only just 30 seconds, he sat there in silence as well. And after 30 seconds, he looked at me and said, Blake, that's not a bad idea. And we went back and forth for a little bit, and with some contingencies, he decided to move forward, co-authoring a book together. My impossible goal had been realized. Flash forward a couple months from now, the book, The Science of Scaling, will be published and released by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and myself. Solely because I gave myself permission to think big, to go for the impossible, to look at a situation and see what most could not. You can do the exact same thing. Not necessarily about a best-selling book or creating an amazing sculpture, but it could be the degree of your happiness, the relationships you have, the size of your business. Now, this just isn't positive thinking and goal setting. It's so much more, and there's scientific proof on what can happen. As an example, here's a study. There's a study done called the neuroscience of possibility thinking. When people think big, their brains activate the prefrontal cortex, responsible for problem solving and goal setting. Additionally, MRI studies show that setting ambitious goals increases dopamine, which fuels motivation and creativity. You can see this as a comparison between small thinking and big thinking, like a car and a rocket. A car and a rocket both start at 0. But a rocket, due to its exponential energy release, reaches unimaginable heights. Big thinking is like rocket fuel. It takes a little longer to lift off, but propels you much further than incremental small thinking. Now consider this graph. So our company is solely focused on helping entrepreneurs scale their business to heights that they previously never imagined possible. Here's what we found from our experience. Linear thinking, or small thinking, creates linear results and performance. When you apply big thinking, when you go for impossible goals, you get nonlinear results and your performance increases significantly. Seth Godin once said, "You can either be remarkable or realistic. The choice is yours." And in 1961, John F. Kennedy chose to be remarkable. In front of the entire world, he set an impossible goal: to put a man on the moon. 8 years later, Apollo 11 launched, defying gravity, doubt every limit ever imagined. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, planting the American flag in the ground, not only symbolizing freedom, but also that the impossible was possible. But what most don't realize is that he left something else behind. his footprint. Because the moon has no atmosphere, scientists say his footprint will remain for over 1 million years. In our case, virtually forever. One decision, one impossible goal, a mark that will never fade. Footprints leave impact. So what about you? How will you leave your footprint? What impossible goal can you go for that will outlast you? Thank you.